All right. We're here to talk about the profiles for drums. MIDI 2.0 has this concept of profiles. We're going to explain just a little bit about what that means and then how it applies to drums today. And next slide. There we go. So, what is a MIDI 2.0 profile? Well, MIDI 2.0 itself, as a fundamental idea, relies on bidirectionality. So two devices can talk to each other and discover each other and auto-connect and auto-configure to talk to each other in a meaningful way. So we're talking about how drums can use profiles, and we've developed one drum profile, and we're working on a second drum profile. I'm going to talk about these two today. The default drum note map profile and the drum performance profile. So what's the difference? Well, the default drum note map profile is generally designed for keyboard instruments, drum machines, and those kinds of instruments where you trigger a sound from a button or that kind of thing. And the drum performance profile is designed more for drums and the instruments that a drummer would play. But there's not a hard line between them. And so some devices will probably use both profiles and support both profiles. And so it's not a clear line. A plugin for drums might respond to a keyboard playing drum notes, but it might also respond to notes from a drum kit. So they're slightly different in their design and their application, but it's not a hard difference between the two. Okay, so let's take a look at the default drum note map profile first. Okay, so the default drum map profile defines 62 MIDI note numbers that have an assigned function. And this has a legacy that goes back to the 1980s. And it's a common note map that was established with drum machines and other instruments in the 80s, and then actually became part of the General MIDI specification in the 90s. And so it's already supported by a lot of products, this particular drum note map. And so you may be familiar with this. There's a C note. If you play it on many synthesizers, it will play a click, a kick drum. Okay, and the D will play a snare drum, and so on. And there are 62 notes that are defined in this mapping. I've just shown you the basic ones here that kind of form a basic drum kit. Okay, and so they're assigned. Now, this is not perfect for a drum set. So the drum set, the kick drum may be sending out a note number that matches a middle C. And the snare drum may be sending the note for a D, but it's not a perfect mapping for drum performance. In particular, I want to point out the hi-hat functions here. Keyboard or drum or pad type of instruments, right? So it's not just a keyboard, but drum pads use the same thing. Okay. And so I can use a keyboard to control a plugin, and these notes, you know what you're going to get, okay? Or I can use finger pads and control, in this case, a drum machine. And these instruments all share the same drum note map, so things are predictable, but they're limited in their performance. And so in particular, I want to talk a little bit about hi-hat control. On a keyboard, you can control the hi-hat with 3 different notes. And if you've ever done this, you've got a closed hi-hat, a pedal, and an open. And we use something called mutually exclusive. So if I hit the open hi-hat and it's ringing, and I hit the pedal or the closed hi-hat, it will clamp off that other note. Okay? And this works fine for playing notes, drums from keyboards or finger pads. It works fairly well, but it's not the way a regular drum kit works. A hi-hat in a drum kit is completely controlled by a pedal and is completely variable. So it's not 3 different notes, and I don't need this mutually exclusive because it just happens in a drum set with a hi-hat pedal. And so this default mapping is not specifically or does not adequately address the way a drum set works. So let's take a quick look at the drum performance profile. Okay, drum performance profile. We define common messages for drum kits. So all drum kits have a hi-hat pedal. So we want them all to use the same message for the position of that pedal. So that kind of gesture is defined. In addition to the note map. So we map them to the same kind of mapping as the default drum map, but we have additional controls that deliver actually the way a drum kit works. So for example, where I hit the drum is not defined in that C note that I play on the piano. It's going to play a snare drum. But with the drum profile, we want to know how far away it is from the center and where you played specifically on the drum, or maybe you even hit the rim. Okay? And so we need these extra gestures to be expressed in this performance kind of profile. Hi-hat pedal, we already discussed how we have the distance of the snares is controlled by this, distance of the two hi-hats is controlled by a pedal. And once they're closed, I can also control the amount of pressure by pushing down on the pedal. And so this other profile deals with this kind of playing performance gesture. Also, choking a cymbal is a gesture that happens when you play the drums as opposed to when you're playing drum sounds from buttons or keys. So these are the kinds of things that we have in the drum profile. So we have also the type of instrument, the name of the instrument is defined by the profile. Dimensions, you can declare this is a shallow snare drum or a deep snare drum, or it's made of this material. This is a maple, or this is chrome or brass. So the type of instrument, dimensions, and then a lot of other properties can be declared in this profile. So we have these two different drum profiles. The default drum note map profile just recently passed adoption in the MIDI Association and in the Association of Musical Electronics Industry in Japan. So we agreed, and so these two organizations, when we agree, it becomes a standard. And so we just reached agreement, and this specification will be published publicly probably in about 1 week or 10 days. Okay? So it's already done, and we're working on the drum performance profile. And this group of people, we've been working on this together now for close to a year.
What time is it?
6-8 months in particular. We've been working together on this performance profile where we talked about the details of how drums, particularly electronic drums, perform and all the nuances that we need to be able to transmit. So we're only partway through this. If this is of an interest to you and you're a developer of software for drums or hardware, MIDI instruments that are related to drums, please join our group. Come and talk to one of us about how you join the group. We're still working on this, and we'd love to have more input. These guys look intelligent, but we need help. So I'm going to ask these guys just to talk a little bit about why a drum profile and what's valuable to you. Let's start with Steve. Why are you participating? And introduce yourself and your company and what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks. Give it up for Mike. Mike Head. What a brilliant mind this guy has. I'm envious of his brain power. Anyways, my name is Stephen Fisher. I work for MIDI. Some people pronounce it Medley. It's still the same company. We're excited to join the MIDI 2.0 profile because we see a vision in the fact of being able to communicate between devices and using these higher resolution parameters to be able to communicate back and forth. Just to give you an idea, I mean, to take you back, if you have just a minute, think about it. Electronic keyboards and electronic guitars have been around for a long time, since the 50s. And they've had all this chance to gain on this technology, and there was drum machines and all those things up until all of a sudden got to be into the 1990s, and all of a sudden the electronic drum set came about. So now there's this electronic drum set. So drummers have been behind the curve as far as technology goes. So you have electronic drum sets now that a lot of drummers never had before. They've got the technology and way to do it, and they want to be like all the other musicians. and actually be able to control and manipulate things like they do on their electronic drum set, like other keyboard players do, especially to have all this controlled. A lot of electronic drummers having a drum set, electronic drum sets, they want to start connecting to other modules and everything, right? And things just didn't work. As Mike explained earlier, you have a drum key and a drum machine, hooking up an electronic drum set, electronic drum kit, to a drum machine or to anything else just didn't work. Mike pointed out a couple of those specific things like the hi-hat. There's no smooth closed open hi-hat. You couldn't hook up an electronic drum kit to a drum machine and choke cymbals. You couldn't make those gestures, as he was talking about, from an electronic drum kit. This is the pathway we're on to making this a better product. So, and then on top of that, you got the fact that now there's sample libraries that came out. So you go, great, now I've got all these great sounds to trigger, but my electronic drum kit, I'm hooking up to my DAW, my sample libraries, and nothing's communicating, nothing's working right, especially like the hi-hat. I'm having to go and reprogram hi-hat note numbers and velocity curves and gate times and all these things to try to get the hi-hat to work. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be. So it's very frustrating for drummers to start to communicate and be able to play what they wanted to play, their feeling, their expression, their dynamic range. And as Mike also pointed out, even just things on the snare drum, all those nuances you can do on all the drums and all the cymbals, I want to be able to communicate that to my music device, to my sound source, and be able to emulate that, to be able to do that, to make those two machines talk to each other so they understand each other, they can communicate, so I can do all my gesturing I want to and play that. And you got to understand too, the drum set's very wide and very dynamic, and that's another reason why it took so long for the electronic drum set to be developed. It's very dynamic sonically, it's dynamic from a product standpoint. There's many components in a drum set. There's a lot of things you can do with each instrument. You manipulate it differently. You manipulate a snare drum different than a tom, a cymbal versus a hi-hat. There's so many different ways you manipulate, so it's very complex in the way it needs to communicate if you want to communicate and have those gestures talk to each other, have those two units, those sounds talk to each other. So, and not only that, but I mean, especially that kind of complexity, when you're dealing with the demographic that uses the product doesn't have quite the IQ level that keyboard players have either. So you got a lot of challenges in that box right there. But you understand, though, I think what's really exciting is you're going to be able to take a drum kit now, and what I play on a drum kit, I can hook up my DAW, another sound source, using MIDI 2.0, and they're going to be able to communicate with each other and say, I've got this sound on this note knob, and I've got these set of parameters here. What do you got? And they, by communication, they talk to each other and go, oh, I've got that too, and I've got, great. Now I can communicate directly with that device. And they both know what they're doing, and I can do all my gesturing and all those wonderful things that you want to do is now become seamless and not a big headache to do that. And even something simple, a lot of things sound complex, but I'll even boil it down to something more simple. In the education world, and Mike Snyder, my friend Mike Snyder here, another brilliant mind, he's very steeped in the education world. And one of the things that I know from just, if I'm a drummer trying to play snare drum and learn my rudiments and those things, I have software that maybe help me improve. But you can never detect right, left hand. You can play with something, but how did you know? It could maybe tell you the timing if you had software connected to a MIDI pad. It could maybe tell you the notes you're playing at what time, but it could never tell you right or left hand. I mean, you could cheat and just do paradiddles with one hand. It wouldn't know the difference. It wouldn't tell you you're doing it wrong. In the case of MIDI 2.0, that's called a single stroke roll, Mike is informing me of. So, but what I can do now with MIDI 2.0, if you take a snare drum, for example, just the snare drum, I can do not only the radius, how far out you are from the center of the drum, but you also do angle. Where am I at in the angle of the drum? So I can even start to detect right and left hand, where that is for doing that. Think of the implications just for anybody developing software and any programs to develop snare drum learning methods. To be able to know that if it plays something into this piece of software, it knows I'm playing right hand or left hand. That's just a snare drum. And so it goes way beyond that when you start getting to the other controls that's getting set up in the profile for doing hi-hat, knowing where the hi-hat is and how much pressure you've got, and cymbals and all those wonderful things that the drummers like to do and how they express themselves and manipulate the sound of a drum set to be able to communicate, have all that information communicated to your sound source, and they can talk together so you can manipulate that and make that happen. So MIDI 2.0 is going to be wonderful, and that's why we're joining any manufacturer to get on board and be with us to adopt this, because it's going to start going, and it's going to be wonderful now. The drummers and electronic drum sets are now going to be at par with all the other great technology and musical instruments that have been out there for a long time. So we're going to be up there with that. So it's a wonderful thing. So, and I'm very proud to be a part of the working group that Mike has set up. To be that, it's been a great learning experience. It's been wonderful. And Medley is definitely on board with developing MIDI 2.0. And that's about it. Love the end. Love Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Love you too. We in our working group, we have multiple companies. Some Japanese companies, some Chinese companies, some from the United States. I'm from Canada. So we're an international group. Mike, what country are you from?
Well, you're from the 51st state, I hear.
51st state. I'm the 51st state, yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I'm Mike Snyder is my name, and I'm from Zildjian Cymbals. And you're like, Zildjian? Right. We actually started a new division within Zildjian about 4 years ago, focusing on new technology and electronic instruments. And it's been wonderful. The Zildjian family has been great. And since Steve covered all the minutia within the spec, thank you for coming. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. We go way back, and we have a lot of fun because we love doing fun things. I know you looked at your watch. I want to say a couple things about this 2.0 spec. It's really amazing because for the first time, and Steve covered it quite liberally, is it both like a DAW or a drum machine to a DAW. There's this bilateral communication back and forth, and you never in 1.0 you could hook them up and they would sort of talk to one another, but now you can request information from let's say a MIDI device, like a drum module, and it will send you, hey, this is a Ludwig Superphonic 5¼ inch by 14 inch snare with wide wires, and it was recorded in a stadium. You can pull up detailed information, request it from your DAW, and it will be sent to the DAW, so you can see exactly what you're dealing with, and you don't have to go back and dig in a bunch of menus in your device to find out what the heck you're hearing. Also, the gestures. This is amazing because up until this point, any gestures like position of playing on the head, the right and left, which is huge for the education market, because we unfortunately have been teaching drums the same way without technology forever, right? This is really going to open up a whole new world in education and possibilities, is that it's going to make the workflow and the information flow from devices really, really transparent right there at your fingertips, and save so much time in workflow. So I'm very excited, and Zildjian is super excited to be a part of it and contribute, because what you're not seeing is going to be the really cool stuff, the stuff that's coming, that's going to leverage all this new profile and make some amazing new, really expressive percussion and drum instruments. Because believe it or not, drums are very, very expressive. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Good point. Kakahashi-san, do you have some message for us also?
Yes, I'm Iko Kakehashi. I'm now working for Zildjian with Mikey. Actually, we have been working for many years now, even before Zildjian. And I think one of the reasons I was invited to this group is I'm just percussionist. Maybe the most annoying people for technology, because we have a lot of method, not only drums, just play hand and finger. We even play the shaker. So how we can transfer the shaker information to the MIDI? So probably we may have some gyro sensor inside, then positional sensing or something. So I'm not sure yet how we can make 2.0 for the percussion instruments. But I'm looking for to work with them for that. And I have something to say from different point of view because before 2.0 we had MIDI 1.0. And when MIDI 1.0 started in 1980s, I was just in music college to study percussion instruments. So I just enjoy acoustic percussion instrument, which is the most primitive instrument in the world, while people working on the most advanced instruments. So maybe I did not contribute anything. But after a while, when I started professional career as a percussionist, and my setting, half of my setting is fully equipped with MIDI devices. I had 15 rack for a lot of sound module, and I control foot pedal to MIDI program change. So that way, MIDI has been a tool for the musician, but that tool gave us a lot of opportunity to create such a many possibility for new music. For example, by drum machine, we have now hip hop. So that way, this tool MIDI has created a lot of new category of music. Not only help us to create music. So that's the point. Then I really look forward to working for MIDI 2.0. By the way, MIDI 2.0 has any function to translate Japanese to English? No, not yet.
That's a profile for next year.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I want to say, thank you. I want to say something about Ikuo, which he's Japanese and he's very humble, and he won't say about himself. He is Ikuo Kakahashi, and Mr. K, or Mr. Kakahashi, Ikutaru Takahashi, was his father, who was not only the founder of Roland, but one of the instrumental people in creating the original MIDI standard. And we are so lucky to have him as part of the Profile team and involved in this project. It's amazing.
So, Ikuo, your son will be involved in MIDI 3.0?
Uh-huh.
Your son will be involved in MIDI 3.0?
I hope so.
Well, thank you for your comments, all three of you. We have a great group of people in this. The major drum manufacturers are working on this together, but we need help too. If you're building a product and this interests you, please join our working group. Your input would be really valuable. Thank you for listening to our presentation.